Hello, my name is Jonathan Chandler and I own and operate Fox Ridge Arms. Today we're going to give you an update on our knife making kit. This knife is made with the exact pieces that come in this kit. First thing you want to do, pick out which pattern you're going to choose or draw your own pattern. I'm going to use one of my patterns, and I think I'm just going to make a kind of a standard skinning knife right here, this one right here, and the first step I'm going to do is just cut this out. So we've got our pattern cut out. We're going to put it on our blank. We're going to check that our pattern fits our blank, and I left a little extra on the point of this on purpose. This pattern is just kind of an idea. You don't have to use it exactly. I'm going to use a Sharpie marker here. A smaller Sharpie would probably be preferred, but I don't see my small one right at the moment. So we're just going to basically draw the outline of this so we can see where we need to cut. And this is just a hog off material. This is not meant to be precise at this point. And if our handle doesn't line up exactly like we want it, we can scoot it over a little bit. Today I'm going to use a grinder to whack these off, and we're going to show you that. If you want to see me use the hacksaw, go back to the original video and you can see those. If we're going to use any power tools, make sure that you're going to use your safety gear. I'm going to use my safety glasses and my respirator and my hearing protection for this, and I'm going to put my apron on. So I'll probably sound funny because I got my respirator on, but we're going to use the cutoff wheel, the little skinny wheel. And I'm going to use a glove on my left hand. And this is soapstone. That's another choice if you wanted to mark on your metal. Alright. Cutoff wheel. We want to stand. Would be preferable if we had something to lean on like our vise here. And we may do that. We cannot cut a curved line with this, but we can make straight cuts a couple of places and it will simulate a curve. But we want to be super still with this. You can't get in here and start crazy moving this. You got to be real still. This is thin metal and it cuts quickly, but you got to be still in your motioning. You can't not twist it. You can't go in here and think you're going to cut around a curve. Got to cut straight. Okay, that side's done. We're just going to nip these corners off. Now to do this finger groove, we're just going to use it on its edge, and we're just going to cut a couple of slices. we're going to switch to our flap disc. This is the one that looks like little sandpaper. If we had a whole lot of grinding to do, you could do your really hard grinding wheel, but we're just going to do the flap disc. This is going to be warm. Don't put this in water. Most, if you got mild steel and you get it grinding, and you can just chunk it in some water and it cools off instantly. Don't put this in water. Let this cool slowly. High carbon steel, we don't want to shock it. We don't want to quench it with water. So here, within less than 5 minutes, we've got our outside profile going here. I left our tip fat still at this point. The tip is the easiest thing to cut down, so leave a little meat there, because when our next step, we're going to be grinding in our bevels. The fear is if you cut it down to point now, by the time you get done, it'll be less than a point. You know, you keep working it back here. So we're going to grind in our bevels, start that at least. And we're just going to use the flap disc. Like I said, this is 1/8 of material, so it is not a whole lot more here than you need to basically heat treat it at this point. You could virtually get away with heat treating it at this point and just go to either filing or grinding it after it's heat treated. But I generally get it a little thinner than this, get the blade started, so at this point, when we ship it to you, it is annealed. That means it's ready to work straight out the box. You don't have to do anything to it. Some high carbon steel you're going to get is going to come to you hard, and so you're going to have to anneal it first, which means you've got to heat it up and let it cool slowly, and that takes time and effort. And so we have had that process done for you when you buy our kit. And like I say, we still have some more work to do on this, but this is basically the rough outline. I hadn't hit our finger groove yet, so we'll do that, and then we will start grinding our bevel here just a little bit. finger groove. I'll turn it where y'all can see it. And I tapered it back this way a little bit for our handle. Whenever we've ground it, now it has burrs on it. This is sharp. These are sharp little edges on it. So this is the time it's good to have our file. Just knock that burr off. When you're using a file, try to always go forward and pick up. Go forward and pick up. If you pull back on your file, you fill it full of crap, fill it full of your metal, and it will not file very well anymore. So this is our rough shape with our burrs taken off. And like I say, within 5 minutes we've got this much done easily with a grinder. We're going to lay in the bevels on this. I generally start our plunge line with the file. That way we've got that set up so that the grinder, we can kind of watch that so we don't grind too far. You can take, and we'll polish this just a little bit, and we'll take a black magic marker and we'll paint this, and then we'll take a drill bit that's the same thickness as our steel. This works for any thickness, but find one the same thickness of your steel, and you can scratch in a center line so you can keep your edge in the center. I just drew in us a plunge line here. Doesn't matter where it's at. I generally leave a little extra here. This is probably the most tricky part of making a knife, is trying to get these plunge lines even. You can do without that plunge line if you make your finger notch just slightly deeper and just sharpen it all the way back, but we'll show you plunge lines. I'm going to file one, and then I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to match it to the other side, and so we're going to do that. Another trick that we can show you is you can paint this with your magic marker. Better if this is good and smooth. I didn't quite smooth it good enough, but paint it with your magic marker. This is handy. Usually I just lay it on the table, but we've got a drill bit that's approximately the same thickness. It doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to flip it over and do it on both sides, and so that'll give us a little bit of a double line. And basically all you do is you lay your drill bit down level with your board and you scratch from one end to the other. Keep your drill bit flat. You're not wanting it to spin on you. And what that'll do is it'll give you a little bit of a scratch to make sure that we're getting it in the middle. We're going to turn it over and do it again. And so we're going to look at that, and we've got a pretty good scratch going there. And we've got a little meat in the middle. That's what we wanted. We want a little meat in the middle. I don't know if y'all can see that good or not. We're going to take advantage of our file has 4 sharp edges, and so we're going to tilt that file up a little bit to start us a groove right on that line, or best we can, straight 90 degrees with the spine of our knife. And once we get that established, then we'll lay our file over flat and start filing on farther down this way. But we want to cut us in a groove to start with. And that's our first little bit. I come back here just a shade too much. I don't want it to go all the way to the top. You couldn't go all the way to the top, it's not a problem, but I want to go a little bit less than that. And we're looking at our line on the inside here. We want to keep that to the middle. And then once we get our crease established, we're going to stick back in there, and we're going to slowly try to keep that same angle and lower that file down. And we're pulling it back and forth. That's mainly to keep it in that groove. If we pick it up every time, you come out of that groove. So that's what we're starting. See our little edge starting right there? That's what we're wanting Now we're going to start and file away from that edge. And we can control how far up we're coming and how far down we're coming with our file. And once we get away from our edge a little bit and we're happy with that depth, we can go back in here, flatten, make sure it's good and flat right there. And we're trying to hold this file at the same angle every time. We're trying not to do this. We don't want to roll the edge. We want to hold that file at the same angle, and we can kind of control that, and you can feel where it's different, higher, lower. And so we're going to, right here, we're going to pull it back and forth like we're not supposed to use a file to get that edge. Now, once we got that established, we can switch back over to our grinder and we can run the rest of this edge. You got to be careful with your grinder. You can go too fast really quickly. So we're going to take it real easy, and we're using a 36 grit grinding wheel here, so we're going to take it real easy. But basically what you're doing with the grinding wheel is the same thing you're doing with that file. You're watching how your scratches come up here, how far you're down on your edge, how far up you're coming. We're trying to keep us a fairly uniform grind. Ideally it would be something like that. From about this way far up, it can be thinner. We can come up, creep on up here a little bit and taper this direction too. But we would like to start out with it being just that taper. You don't have to taper the front of it. It's going to taper up here anyway where you got your blade. But we'll see what we can get done. It's built up some heat, so we're going to let it cool. And then we're going to use our built-in calipers, and we're going to feel along. I'm not pulling on the edge of it, I'm feeling how thick it is. And I can feel whether it's thin or thick spots, or if it's more or less uniform. Once we get it down to more or less uniform, we'll flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. It feels to me like it's a little thick right there on that strand. We would rather not see this metal start turning colors. We'd rather not see that. If you notice my tip, I left it fat and blunt on purpose because we're going to
sneak up on sharp on that. We can come down here and keep cutting a little bit more and get sharp, or we can keep grinding off this. I'm gonna call that close enough for the moment for this side. We're gonna come back and we're gonna touch it up with a file just to even it out. I am not pushing down on this. I am barely touching this thing, and it's taking it off that fast. So we're gonna pull it out the vise, show it to you. That's what you got so far. Hard to see, but it is, you know, approximately halfway down. We're going to turn it on this other side. We're going to get us a mark, a little bit of a mark where this plunge line is. Let me show you what that looks like. The plunge lines are more or less even. You can always touch those up a little bit with your file. Alright, we've got our plunge lines. If they're looking even, we can switch over to a safe edge file, which this is basically just a file I ground off the teeth on one edge and made it smooth. And that way when we lay this in here and we're filing, it's only filing on this side and not on that side. And so we put our safe edge to our bevel once we're happy with them being even. And we can switch over and we can file right against there without damaging this other part, as long as we keep it down in that groove. And you can make these files. They sell them online and all that stuff, and they're I don't know, for what you're getting it ain't much. But you can take that same flap wheel and put this in your vise and just smooth off one side of your file. I left the other side where I could use both ways on this same file, and I even smoothed off this part. Some of the knives I do that have hidden tangs, especially, I'll put a bolster on or a guard on, and this allows me to get down into those little places that's just a little teeny, start you filing out for your guards and stuff. But like I say, we got it a little hot. It started to run color on us, so we're going to stop and let it cool off. And I'm just going to lay it on our vise. We can put a file on top of it. Anything that's metal is going to draw heat out of your steel, so if it's looking too hot, don't throw it in a bucket of water. Do not do that. Just lay it on something metal, or just leave it in your clamp and walk away for a few minutes and let it cool off naturally. We don't want to harden it. That makes it harder to file, and quenching it in water is certainly bad. So we're pretty good on the way for our first knife here. We want to get it to where we can hold it again and look at it good this way and make sure that we're fairly even. And I'm not. I'm pretty good down here. It's pretty even. Up here it needs a little more work, so we're going to put some marks on it so we know where that's at. And we're going to just hit that a time or two more with our grinder. But if you can see how fast this goes as compared to just a file, you saw how fast I cut those bevels in. So a file will work. This will work very nicely with a sharp file, not a problem. On the other video I showed, I put the file in the vise and I drew this way on the file, and then I would turn it around and I would draw. I would push that way. What you're trying to do with that is, the file is meant to push forward on your blade. So if you got it in there with the handle that direction, you want to push. If you got in there the handle this direction, we'll flip your blade over and pull, and that will give you the same principle we're doing. And we'll do some of that in just a second to flatten this. Our grinder is fast, but it gives you this bumpy kind of deal, and no matter what you do, it's going to be bumpy some. So we can flatten it with a nice big file like this really quickly once we get it rough shaped, and that's what we're at. We're at rough shape at this point. And so this is cooled off good. We can put it back in here. I'll show you the edge of this. So you can see how thick it is at this point. The tip is still the thickest, which is what we want. And down here next to the where we started is the thinnest, and that's what we want at this point. The tip is the easiest to file and grind, so that's what we want to leave the thickest. We want to feel this thing, and feeling it is, you can look at it all you want to, but feeling it is what I do. I can feel that this side has been ground much more severely than this side up on this section up here. So that's where I'll put our marks. We're going to go back and touch that part up again. And edge. So I tilt it back slightly, and we're getting to be more and more what we're wanting there. And the grinder works very fast to do that, but a file will do just as good, if not better, and be slower to mess up. So we've got this in our vise good. We're going to start and file this. And I'm going to file it from a couple of directions. That way I'm flattening any kind of bumps that I may be putting in with the file. And you can draw file, which means you just pull it straight out. And we can get that thing down to pretty flat pretty quickly. And with the file, you watch your scratch patterns. You see where you're at. So we're going to stop on this side for the moment. We're back there. And we're going to flip her over and do a little bit on the other side. And so we're at the stopping point there. And we're not quite sharp back here where we started, but we are sharp up here. And we don't want to be sharp at this point. So we're going to take a finer file, and we're just going to blunt that edge. We don't want this thing sharp at this moment. We would like our edge to be the same thickness all the way from tip to tang, basically. We want it, and at this point we don't want it to be sharp. We're going to drill holes in this. The last thing we want is this thing spinning around and being sharp on us. So if you get it down to sharp, which I did, happens some, just blunt the edge. You don't have to go crazy with it, but just blunt the edge so it's not, so you can rub your finger on it, it's not going to cut you. We're going to switch over now, and we're going to switch to a half round file or even the grinder again, and we can touch up this tip and make it come to a point at this point. Start seeing those colors run again, stop, and let it cool off. And we're almost to a point, I'm going to call that good enough. We can always come back once we've hardened it and do that a little bit more. But we're pretty good to shape there. So we've got our butt end of our knife sticking out here. We've rough shaped it. We're just going to take our smooth file . To make something round, you got to keep this moving like that. You cannot hold in one place and file and file and file and then move to another place. You'll end up like a diamond shape. So you got to keep this thing moving as you're filing. our back of our knife blade is taking a few dings because our teeth on our vise is biting into it, so we're going to just clean that up just a smidge. Bit with our half round file in our finger well here. Do a little bit on this corner here. Okay, so we're about at the right point here. Okay, so that's what we've got. We've got about, I don't know, 30 minutes into this and me filming it. But we just went through and we touched up the finger groove, the back here, and the inside curve of this a little bit with the half round file, which looks like that, half round. One side's round and one side's flat. If you're doing inside curves, you use the round part. If you're going to do an outside curve, like from here over, you'd use the flat part. Or the flat part goes on the outside curve. But within 30 minutes, I mean literally it's 30 minutes, 45 minutes at the outside, and me filming it, we have our profile ground, we have our bevels ground in, we are using the power tool, we are using a little grinder. The grinder I showed you is slightly different than the one that I'm using. I looked at them again. This one is a Hitachi grinder. They're basically the same grinder. I do like these. I thought I was buying the exact same grinder, but I do like these Hitachi grinders. Had those for right many years. But this is our knife blank, rough shaped. Next step is to sand off as much of the grinding marks and file marks as we can. Alright, what I've done, I've taken the last few minutes and I have filed this more or less flat. Just took 5 minutes, and this where we'd used the grinder and the other files, we just had a few lumps and bumps. I just got that flat. I took one little strip of our sandpaper that come in our kit. I've got just a little block of wood here. We're going to take this and we're just going to work on getting this all one scratch pattern here. And we'll do this on both sides. This is the roughest sandpaper in the kit. And as you can see, it doesn't take very long to get this. I'm going to scoop my handle out just a smidge to get this above the plunge clip here. But what you're looking for at this point is any deep scratches from either the grinder or the files, and you're going to keep working with this grit sandpaper until all of those deep scratches are gone, and we'll flip it up and do the edges, the handle and everything, and the other side of course. But it doesn't take very long to get each grit of sandpaper to work here. And we're going to go up to our second highest grit with this. We're not going to use the last piece at all, and we're going to save about half of the sandpaper or more to finish with. We're just doing this for our heat treat. And you don't have to sand the entire handle. I'm sanding up here on this portion because some of that may show when we put our handle on. Some of it may not. But we want to get it to the same finish as the blade so it doesn't look weird. So we're going to sand it. And so there, that's to, what's this paper? 150 grit. So we went from file marks to 150 grit in what, 2 minutes? And we're going to look at that real good, and if we've got any deep scratches we want to get rid of, right here's a pretty deep one. We're going to keep working on that until we get rid of those deep scratches. And if we need to, we can fold this up tight and be right up to that plunge line. So I'll get you a close-up of that and see what it looks like. And that's what it looks like when you sanded the first. That's with 150 grit. And like I said, we're not making a samurai sword here. It doesn't take that much. Doesn't take that much to sand it. And we'll turn it over. We'll do the other side, and around the edge, we'll bring you back. And we want to do this top edge. You don't have to do the whole handle part because we're going to sand on it, file on it some more when we get the wood on it. But we want to do out here on the knife blade with each progressive grit of sandpaper. And our little block we have, it's actually a piece of 5/4 decking. It's got a round edge on it anyway. And it's just a piece of scrap. I didn't choose that in particular reason, but since it has it, we'll use it like a half round file. We'll just get in a little. And on this front, I'm tilting it as I go. You can notice that. Back here, we're going to keep it flat and straight. And we may, after we heat treat it, we may come back here and file that just a little bit to put just a tiny burr on that. And that will help us with our fire striking. But if you notice, I don't know if you can see it. Our tip is not quite sharp yet. We're keeping it blunt until we get our heat treatment on there. Then we can come back and we'll just either file or polish this corner right here and make it sharp. But we want it to be as smooth and flat as we can get it at this point. So like I said, we're going to round this front nose here. Alright, we're going to stop there. I used 2 pieces of the 150 to get down to what we needed, and I used 1 little strip of 220, and I used 1 little strip of 400. I'm saving this 600 for the very end so we can go back and really polish this thing really good. At this point, we're going to polish this back side with the 400, and then we're going to set up to drill the holes, because this is all we're going to do. We're not going to sand the handle. That's not necessary. We're going to put glue on that, so it don't matter what it looks like. Alright, that's about it on that. And you saw I did that by hand, not. You can use a vibrating sander if you got one. No shame in that. But by hand is just as good, if not better. And so we've got our good plunge lines. They're good and cut in. Our finish is set, it's kind of a satin finish now. And these knives, I mean for them to be used. So if you can buff them and do all kind of stuff to them. But when I'm intending to use the knife, I take it about 600 or even 800 maybe sometimes. But any more than that, as soon as you use it, it's not that anymore. So 600 is plenty. And so we'll bring you back when we're setting up the holes.